Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Wake Up with YPN. I'm Brooke Bondorf. We have some special guests joining us this week. We've got Colin Allen, an NAR lobbyist, and special guest Jack Greacen. He is our National Association of Realtors political representative and advocacy. So thank you for joining us, you guys. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Sure, it's been a crazy season, a crazy couple of weeks for you guys.
That's a bit of an understatement.
How are you holding up?
Happy it's over with. We're just a week the other side of the elections tomorrow, and it still kind of feels as tense as it did last week. So,
yeah, I think we finally recovered the sleep that we lost last Tuesday night.
Oh, good.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I'm just going to start off and let you guys introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about yourself, how you got into the position you're in, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, Colin, kick it off.
Great, thanks. Hey, so Colin Allen, again, one of the lobbyists at NAR currently. I work with Senate Republicans, so we split things up on the lobby team, House and Senate R&D. So I've been with NAR for about a little over 8 years now. Before that was with Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. I did legislative and policy work for him for about 7 years before that. Prior to Lindsey Graham's office, did more of the political analysis side. I worked down at the University of Virginia Center for Politics for Professor Larry Sabato. You might see him on TV every once in a while doing a little bit of election analysis. I did a lot of state level stuff in Virginia and kind of helped him out with national level political analysis. Did a lot of backup for him. So prepared for the material slides, things like that you might see on the television. But that's, have always been kind of a political junkie. Tried to go through the, thought about doing finance in college for a little while and didn't work out so well. Took a little hiatus, went back to politics, and here I am.
That's great. Awesome. Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Jack Greacen. I'm your NAR political director. My team works in concert with Colin's team in just a little bit of a different capacity. We work with the membership to talk to you all about the things that Colin and his team are working on Capitol Hill. A little background for myself, I actually spent 10 years working for Florida Realtors in a very similar capacity. And then before that, held a number of different positions in and out of politics, but spent some time working for a United States Senator in upstate New York. My team is ultimately the one that's responsible for coming to the state of Iowa and working with you all to educate you about the issues that we deal with, and then also communicate with you during election seasons when it's time to go out and support the members of Congress and the United States Senate who've supported you. It's been a great ride for the last 13 years, having fun talking with various states and also trying to work the dynamics of understanding where our members are on any given day of the week regarding a particular member of Congress, but also the issues that we wind up dealing with. And so it makes this job very, very interesting.
I bet. So before we dig too deep into all of this, I know you guys have a ton of information for us. I want to invite the public and everyone watching, if anyone has questions, feel free to just type it in the chat room and we will address them as we go. So tell us kind of how this election season was for you guys. I know it was probably insane. What were you dealing with through all this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the election season in and of itself has been ongoing. To say that has just been this last year is probably not true. This election cycle really started back in 2018 when the Democrats took majority control of the House, and then in strong fashion started pushing for their efforts leading into the presidential election here. What's interesting to see is how our members reflect what was happening nationally. So you're going to have to kind of take a step back for a second and look at this whole picture holistically. Way back in 2010, it's the second half of the first term of President Barack Obama. Tea Party comes in and they take control of the House and Senate, and then that sort of sets the standard going forward. All of this laid the groundwork for what we're dealing with today, where you have a very progressive left taking control of the Democratic Party and pushing the issues further left, and sort of the American public trying to figure out where we stand. Trump has become the brand for the Republican Party, as progressives have become the brand for the Democratic Party, and so not everybody falls into those groups. And what's very interesting is when you look at how we identify, there's a very small majority, about 30% of Republicans who still identify as the hard right Republican. And there's only about 30% of Democrats who ultimately go that way. And so that takes about 60% of the population. And there's 40% of us who are sitting somewhere in the middle trying to figure out where we are on the left and the right. And our members reflect that. Some of them are very conservative. Some of them are very progressive. Others are, right smack dab in the middle where the rest of us are, and they're all trying to figure that out. And so it makes a very interesting election cycle when you're trying to thread that messaging and talk about issues, because what we find are our members are either on the far right, the far left, or somewhere in the middle, just kind of scratching their heads, wondering where they want to go. You think that's right, Colin?
Yeah, which I was going to say, you see that work out pretty well in the elections, right? You've got what's essentially a split. It certainly appears that that Vice President Biden has won the presidential election. That Republicans, despite predictions and polls, have actually picked up a few seats in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Oh, hey, guess what? We got two special elections in Georgia that are going to decide Senate control on January 5th. So, yeah. So we're, here we are a week past the election. We've got a decent idea of where things are going to go, but I think those two special elections in Georgia are really going to determine the path, at least on the legislative side, moving forward next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I think that's a great reflection of kind of, you got a lot in the middle, and the country is fairly evenly divided ideologically.
Yeah.
So can you guys tell us, just for some of maybe the new members out there watching, what your job really entails and what you guys do for NAR and what you do for us?
Yeah. So again, we're probably missing a third arm of probably the advocacy team that we have. Colin obviously deals directly with Capitol Hill, and if you want to think of it this way, Colin is the people specialist, on Capitol Hill. He knows the members of Congress. He knows the staff. Myself, I work with state staff. I work with members. And I'm the expert on that side. But we also have policy people. And those folks, all three of us are essentially the lobbying team that goes up and tries to advocate for our issues. What's interesting is to see how those issues have evolved this cycle, to see sort of the competitive nature of it. We've constantly been chasing our tails in some respects as far as trying to make sure members are aware of how these issues have transitioned. And it's interesting to also see how some of the members have responded to certain things. When you start talking about the issues that have been prominent for the Trump presidency, like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we're still yet determining how people are going to respond to that now that the Biden administration is so strongly saying that they're going to change some of the tax rolls and the various brackets that it's going to wind up impacting. That's very clearly going to impact some of our members. My job is to make sure that as Colin is working with Capitol Hill and getting information on the issues that are coming down the pipeline, whether or not that actually gets traction or not, we're communicating back to you all with some sort of effective message saying, hey, this is the issue that we need to work on. And Colin, I don't know what you're hearing up there right now, but is there any movement on anything right now at this point?
Yeah, so I think everybody is trying to recover from last week and figure out what's going to happen next, right? So the Senate will be back in town this week. Nominally, they will be working on, I think the thing that brings them back is a judicial nomination. So that's what they'll be working on the floor this week. But behind the scenes, I think they'll be trying to figure out, hey, what happens with where they left off was kind of COVID relief legislation. Is there some appetite to do something on COVID relief here in the lame duck? And I think you'll be seeing, as the week goes on, the release of the spending bills for the rest of the year. So where we're operating right now is we've got funding for government operations through about December 10th. What they'll need to do is resolve that. And any of these issues on COVID relief will probably get wrapped into a spending bill before the end of the year. My guess, based on knowing that we're not going to know what control of the Senate looks like next year, is that you'd see some kind of like bridge into next year, right? That neither side, may want to go for like a big deal at this point, but they'd be willing to do something that gets, that funds the government and that gets some COVID relief. probably on things like, with news out of Pfizer this morning on promising vaccine results, doing something on vaccines and funding distribution and things like that. So I think you could definitely see a deal on that side moving forward. Again, like looking to get something into next year. But as members return to the Capitol this week, and this is where I'd say it's a little weird on this end, right? Like members are in the Capitol, but those of us who would normally be up there wearing our shoes out, the doors are closed to us at this point. We're doing a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of phone calls, and interacting with members of Congress and staff in ways that we really hadn't in the past. I mean, it's kind of fun from that perspective to see the staff, if they're not having 10 or 11 meetings a day now. Sometimes they're looking for stuff to do, right? So it's all about calling and being on their radar and making sure that they're hearing you more often. With not having a ton of constituent meetings and things like that they would normally be doing right now. So it's been a different way to interact with folks throughout this, and hopefully we'll be ideally back in May. Maybe when we can have the DC meetings in DC and be back in the Capitol. But I think a lot of that's going to be dependent on when they can get a vaccine out and really feel comfortable with having lots of people back in the buildings.
So yeah, granted, COVID, we've got a vaccine hopefully on the way. What do you guys see, moving forward for the next year? Lots of things very uncertain right now, but anything you have on your radar?
Yeah, I would, again, back to the COVID piece of things, right? Like it's really top of mind right now. I could see a smaller deal this year. And then I think, if you look at kind of the Biden transition plan, right? I think they would expect to try to do something larger. They've also named infrastructure as a big thing. If you're looking at recovery and spending money and putting people back to work, these shovel-ready projects, I think, are something that appeals to both sides of the aisle, right? Like it's something that, you could do a lot of broadband, you could do a lot of, roads and bridges and things like that. But I wouldn't, limit it to the traditional, again, roads and bridges, right? Like I think broadband is something that people have seen, or cellular, how to build out and allow people to do the things that they want to do from where they are, rather than, necessarily being tied to a desk somewhere. So I think that's something that you could see. The Senate will be tied up a lot, right? In a transition, they're going to have to confirm a whole lot of new agency heads and cabinet members and things like that. So I think you'll see a big push, during the first quarter. It'll really be helping the president fill out his cabinet. And, if you end up with a Republican Senate, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, right? Republican senators could work with the administration to help and build some goodwill there, confirm folks who, maybe not are like ideologically or consistent with all of what they want, but they want to do things like, make sure that we've got folks in the right place to monitor terrorism, defense, the Treasury, things like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to build some steps to cooperation that could pay legislative dividends later in the year.
Fantastic. So we had one question come in. We're wondering about, so Iowa City, especially here, we're we have the University of Iowa, so we have a big rental market here. Do you see any rental assistance maybe expected to be moving forward?
That's one of the things that we've been advocating for pretty strongly, right? As we're looking at COVID relief legislation, I think it's something that's definitely in play and could be a possibility for a lame duck. It could also be a possibility in the first quarter of next year as well. So it's definitely something that NAR is advocating very strongly for. I'd say it's, if not the top priority, one of the top priorities in this discussion of COVID and how to proceed forward. Again, you've got kind of an administration policy here, and we're looking for some relief from Congress for a policy that the administration put in place.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything else you guys want to touch on this morning? I'm sure you've got tons going on.
Yeah, I think one thing I would share with our members, and it's important to understand, is right now things are in a very interesting flux, right? We've got the Georgia Senate seats that are going to be coming up for a runoff. How those turn out, where the United States Senate comes up, that's going to really change the power dynamics in Washington, D.C. What's most interesting is, also some of the changes that happen on the House side. And so, how all of this takes our members of Congress, particularly your members in Iowa, who, as a state, you guys punch well above your weight. And it's important to understand that, because the time that your members have been in Congress, right now, the average tenure of a member of Congress, I think it's 8 years in the House and 10 years in the Senate. It doesn't take long before you become a very influential member. And so to see where these members of Congress wind up in these new administrations, and to see the sort of influence that they're going to wind up having, is going to be something to really pay attention to. And so as things start to evolve over the next few weeks, where we start to break into some of the numbers on what happened and why, it's going to be very interesting to see who gains chairmanships, who has key committees to start working on, and then more importantly, to see do the Democrats wind up with all three chambers, or does the Republicans maintain control of the Senate? All of this is going to be a key dynamic when we start looking at the issues that Colin and everybody else is going to be working on Capitol Hill. And so we'll start to communicate with you all and start to explain what do we think the dynamic is going to look like. How can you be more helpful? Various ways that we can leverage Iowa City and the state to help us get our issues across the finish line.
Yeah, and again, to add to that, at least from the Senate side, I was going to have two very important senators, and one who's going to be very thankful to realtors for returning to the Senate in the next Congress, right? So Senator Grassley's been there, for what are we, upwards of 40 years at this point. He'll be the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, regardless of how it works out, whether he's the chairman or whether he's the ranking member. And Senator Ernst, despite, this is kind of the interesting thing, right? Like you had a whole bunch of Senate races that looked like they were done. This being one of them. I think Iowa, Maine, even you get into South Carolina and Montana, some of these things that didn't look like they were, or maybe were not traditionally competitive races. We've got members who are coming back and who are going to be senior members of committees who are there in large part to the efforts on the political side. Thank you, Jack, for all of your sleepless nights here. To coming back to realtor support. So I think it's really important, and thank you for the resources that you give us that we're able to leverage to help candidates win these elections.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on this morning?
No, just a giant thank you to all the members in Iowa for getting out and voting.
Yeah.
And for joining us at 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's number 2.
Well, and thank you guys on behalf of the Iowa City Association and Iowa Association of Realtors. We really do thank you and appreciate all of your hard work. So
thanks.
That's all I can do for you guys today.
Good to join you.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck with everything.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Have a good Monday, you guys.